Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're diving into something that could totally change the way the internet works, moving us away from the giant platforms that pretty much run our digital lives. We're going to be looking at a project called Verana, which has this huge goal of building an open trust layer for the entire internet. So let's break down what that even means, and more importantly, why it really matters.
Okay, so to really get what Verana is all about, you've got to wrap your head around this one simple but really powerful idea. Right now, on today's internet, your entire digital life is basically rented. Yeah, think about it. Your social media presence, your business's online profile, all the content you create, you don't actually own any of it. Verana's vision is to flip that completely, to move us to a world where our digital lives are finally truly owned.
I mean, if you've ever tried to build an audience on a platform, you know this feeling. You are completely at the mercy of their algorithm. They can just decide to change the rules one day, tank your reach, or even just kick you off entirely. And just like that, all that value, all that work you put in, it can just vanish. You're basically a tenant playing by the landlord's rules, and they can end your lease whenever they feel like it.
So the big question is, how do we fix this? Well, this is where Verana steps in. And look, this is not just another app or some new platform you have to sign up for. That's the key. Think of it more like a fundamental piece of public infrastructure, an open trust layer. The whole point is to give you the actual tools to own your identity, to control your data, and to build digital services that nobody can just take away from you.
All right, so how do we actually build this new, owned internet? It sounds great in theory, but how does it work? Well, Verana's whole design is built on two main layers that work together. Let's dig in.
The very first layer, the foundation, is what Verana calls ecosystems. You can think of these as the rule makers. So imagine governments that issue digital IDs, or maybe a healthcare group that manages who's a certified doctor, or even banks verifying financial information. These organizations act as the trust anchors for their little corner of the world. They set the standards, they define the rules of what's considered real and trustworthy inside their network. And then, built right on top of that foundation of trust, you get the second layer, verifiable services. Now this is where it gets really interesting, because this is where all of us come in. The creators, the organizations, individuals. Literally anyone can deploy a service. It could be your own social media channel, a personal AI assistant, a catalog of your creative work. And here's the game changer. These services are what we call self-sovereign. You own them, completely. No one can just decide to deplatform you out of the blue.
Okay, wait a minute. If everyone's out there creating their own independent services, that brings up a massive question, right? How in the world do you find anything? If there's no central app store, no Google ranking everything, how does discovery even work? The answer is this really cool thing called the Verana Trust Resolver. And the easiest way to picture it is, imagine the old Yellow Pages, right? But for the entire internet, and it's all cryptographically guaranteed. Which is just a fancy way of saying the information is mathematically proven to be real and nobody's messed with it. So instead of searching based on what companies paid to promote, you search for provable facts that are backed by these things called verifiable credentials.
Okay, let's look at a real-world example. Check out this query here. You're not just typing plumber in Bogota into a search bar. You are specifically asking the network to show you plumbers who hold a verified plumber credential from a specific, trusted group called verified workers. The people you find aren't the ones who paid the most for ads. They're the ones who can actually prove they're legit.
Or how about this one? This is a problem we all deal with. How do you find the actual official account for some influencer, let's call him Bob, and not one of the 1,000 fake impersonator accounts? Well, you could run a query like this. Show me the social channel that holds an official credential from the Blue Network and also verifiably owns the handle @BobInfluencer. See? It's all about finding what's provably authentic.
And that's the bottom line. This completely turns the whole economic of ad-driven visibility on its head. Instead of this endless battle of marketing budgets and trying to game some secret algorithm, it creates a system where people and businesses can compete on what should have mattered all along, their actual trustworthiness and authenticity. The results are totally transparent because they're based on data anyone can check.
Okay, so you might be thinking, this sounds cool, but if you get rid of the ad model, how does a system like this actually pay for itself? How does it survive? And that leads us to the new economy that Verana is proposing, one built not on eyeballs and ads, but on reputation.
The way it sustains itself is actually built right into the system. First, those ecosystems, the rule makers we talked about, they get to design their own business models. So maybe an organization pays a tiny fee to the ecosystem every time it issues a new credential. Then, those fees get automatically and transparently sent out to reward the other participants who are helping to keep the network secure and valuable. And a small portion of every single fee goes into building something called a trust deposit.
So what on earth is a trust deposit? Well, you can think of it like a security deposit or a form of collateral. As you participate in the network, issuing trustworthy credentials, being a good actor, your deposit grows. It's basically a way to make sure everyone has some skin in the game, right? It makes the whole system accountable to itself, without needing a central boss to watch over everyone.
This trust deposit is so clever because it does a few really important things. It provides a clear incentive to behave well. But it's also the enforcement mechanism. If you break the rules of the ecosystem, poof, a part of your deposit can be slashed, which basically means you forfeit it. It creates real financial consequences for being a bad actor. And this is so important. It's non-custodial. That means you and only you control your funds. No central company can just freeze your account or take your money.
So all of this stuff, all your activity on the network, how big your trust deposit is, your history, it all gets bundled together to dynamically create a public trust reputation score. It's kind of like a credit score, but for online credibility. This score becomes a totally transparent, verifiable way for anyone to see just how trustworthy you are, and they can decide if they want to interact with you based on that. So okay, let's step back for a second. When you put all these pieces together, the two layers, this new kind of search engine, this reputation-based economy, what you're really looking at is a massive paradigm shift. It's a fundamental move away from the closed-off, centralized platforms that we're all stuck using today.
And this slide really says it all. On one hand, you've got the platform model we live in now. It's all about central control, subscriptions, and vendor lock-in. You're trapped. And on the other hand, you have this new infrastructure model that Verana is building. It's open for anyone to use, it's decentralized by design, and it's built so that you are in charge by default. It's not a service you use, it's a public utility you build on.
And maybe this is the single most important thing to take away from all of this. With the platforms of today, you're just a user signing up for an account. With a system like Verana, the whole idea is that you're an owner. You don't just use the service, you own the very rails of the digital trust infrastructure itself.
So I want to leave you with this one final thought. This shift from a rented internet to an owned one, it opens up a whole universe of possibilities we're probably only just beginning to imagine. So think about it. If you really truly weren't afraid of being kicked off a platform, if you could build on a foundation of actual verifiable trust instead of just who has the biggest ad budget, what would you create? Seriously, what would you build?